do you have any cheap heat?
I've got something from Logan Paul talking about the Money in the Bank match. It got a lot of replays, perhaps some social media traction. But Logan Paul and Ricochet were involved in a long, slow developing what was supposed to be a much faster high spot through 2 tables. And Logan Paul's basically saying on his podcast that he said there was a botched move with a dangerous landing. He says, keep in mind, I'm a noob. I don't really know what I'm doing out there. So when stuff goes wrong, I don't really know how to improv. He wound up just letting Ricochet take sort of control of that spot. They wound up executing something. I don't know how. I mean, anytime you're flying through the air into a table, into 2 tables, yes, there's a huge risk involved. But it looks like it wound up being executed fairly well, in the sense that they executed the move. It looked like a big old crash through tables like it's supposed to. But it didn't seem like either guy was in terrible danger once the move was over.
No. But they did break their fall with their head, which is not where you want to land that. Yeah, the Spanish Fly. I feel a certain type of way about that move already, because sure, it is cool and flippy-ish, and I think that's what Ricochet does best, and I know Logan Paul also wants to do that stuff. But, you know, why don't you guys just go off into the tables? I don't know. We got to do a Spanish Fly onto our head. It's already a car crash crazy enough match. Do we need to add that to it? But ultimately, I have to say, kudos to him for kind of. I guess there's 2 things. There's 2 things I really have 2 takeaways. It's good that he is recognizing that, and it's interesting to hear him talk about how he can't improvise yet, which totally makes sense because that only comes from experience. You can't really teach that, you know. But on the other hand, he's talking quite candidly about spots he's doing and how, and kind of like way talking about, like, you know, out of like, oh, this is what I was doing during the show. Like, kayfabe's completely dead for him. Where he's even talking about, like, oh, like, it's tough when you're in there and you can't improv because you don't really know how to. And then this is what we did.
Yeah, it seems like he's constantly doing shoot interviews, but whereas it's kind of fun to see the old timers do shoot interviews about the old days after they've retired, like Logan Paul's in the process of possibly building a career, and he's constantly doing shoot interviews on his own podcast.
If Roman Reigns right now was sitting there doing a podcast and just talking about like how they come up with the lines and all, and they're really digging deep into it, you'd be like, no, like, this is the best thing on TV as far as WWE is concerned.
Yep.
And probably pro wrestling is concerned, is bloodline stuff. Like, don't tell the people.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that one. The whole Logan Paul thing, because he's such a media star and the WWE really can't control him. The WWE, in a sense, is almost at Logan Paul's mercy.
For sure.
If they want to keep working with him. Because he already has a brand. His brand is either being very candid with his audience or being really good at faking a candor with his audience. So this is really unusual for pro wrestling, even in the Vince McMahon era, even in the post testifying before state legislatures era, even in the post steroids trial era, when, you know, the curtain was pulled back a little. This is new ground.
Yeah, totally crazy. I mean, to go that far, you know, and to just start to explain what you're doing in that grade of detail a week after the show, rather than like when we're hung up and like nobody really remembers it, and it's like, oh yeah, we were doing this back then, and that's really interesting. But again,
does it ruin it for you? Because it really doesn't ruin it for me. No. But I wonder if there are fans that get annoyed at that. Are you one of them? Do you get kind of annoyed at that?
I wouldn't watch his. I've seen clips of his podcast, and I would never watch that thing. So
I've never seen it either. And I'm not like clawing at the computer to go find it.
That's just totally not what I would watch. But, you know, I'd have to say be a little careful if you do see him being like a potential star. Like if he's, you know, I'd prefer that he didn't do that. Although kayfabe is dead. But when you have guys, you know, and maybe this is a good example of one right now, is MJF never breaks kayfabe. And he does these shoot interviews as MJF, and he does post-match conferences as MJF. And it's really tough to tell who this guy really is, and it's believable because he lives the character, you know?
That's old school pro wrestling, though, isn't it?
Yes. You know,
I like that about MJF. I like that he's that guy wherever he is publicly. It's
crazy. And to be that much of a jerk, he's unbelievable. The stuff he says to the people that are interviewing him, and he's just so quick-witted that he really pulls it off. But yeah, so there's a great example of a guy that just doesn't break kayfabe, and I think it's really helped him out a lot in his career. Because the second they start to break kayfabe and they start to do like little talk shows and they're not baby faces, like, you know, it sort of takes away from it.